All right, let's talk about why your small, exciting study with 37 of your friends isn't impressing anyone anymore.
Why are you choosing violence this morning? Like,
it's where I'm at,
why
man.
are you firing shots?
Well, not shots really. Look, I love a good qualitative study or even a good exploratory study to begin, but really, we need to have an honest conversation about the opportunities to work with large data out there.
I mean, truth, because there's really some questions, some research questions that you might want to inquire about that you simply cannot answer with 37 participants, 23 classroom observations, or 30 interview transcripts.
Exactly, and for too long, we've hidden behind the fact that we want to produce articles really fast, and 40 people is fairly fast. 23 is even faster sometimes. Mm-hmm. And also saying, you know, in our field or in the way we do business, we don't do this kind of research.
And meanwhile, there's this tricky balance where policy, particularly around education, where we live, is being decided based upon findings from these huge administrative and corporate data sets with millions of records. And we're kind of over here arguing about the theoretical significance of our very carefully selected, but ultimately not really generalizable 12-person study. Important, but not important in the same way.
No. And so today we're talking about large data sets. Why you should seek them out, where you should find them, where can you find them, and how to actually analyzing them without getting crushed by computational complexity.
Computational complexity.
I love that.
Word twisters this morning.
Yes.
I'm Nick Husbye. I'm an associate professor of elementary literacy education, K6, here at UNL.
Guy Trainin, professor here in the Department of Teaching, Learning, and Teacher Education at UNL.
And there's one thing that we want to be clear about in this particular episode, because this is not about abandoning rich description or theoretical sophistication, but really about thinking about adding, not replacing, this notion of empirical firepower to your arsenal of research tools.
All right, so let's get into it.
See, didn't forget the intro. So, Guy, king of the quantitative amazingness. I want you to take on a role that you're not familiar with. Devil's advocate.
All right.
You never play the devil's advocate. It's going to be something very foreign to you. But I want to talk through, in particularly reading education right now, we're experiencing this real big tension between large scale, large N work, meaning, you know, numbers of participants, and small scale, small N qualitative work. Now, talk us through, as someone with a background in large scale quant work, why should we believe that like bigger automatically means better? Does that actually hold true? And aren't we just privileging quantification over depth?
So, I think we hinted in the introduction about this. I don't think it's better. I think it's doing a very different kind of work. That is what we can do in that small study with, I just finished a 4-year study with 20 teachers at a time. That is a very small sample. Even if I go back to counting all of their students, it's still not huge. And so there's definitely something to be said for smaller studies that get into the innards of everything that's happening. But eventually, we do have to talk about generalizability. We have to talk about the fact that an intervention I do here on campus with even 30 kids or 40 kids, I think about Maureen Lovett's work, for example, in teaching phonics. Fantastic work in an isolated university setting with all the powers of the university and professors just focusing on that one or two children at a time, that does not in any way really reflect the real environment of real classrooms or what happens when you try to go to scale. So both of these problems are out there. And so do we need the small studies? Absolutely. Do they give us all the answers we want? No, for two reasons. One is the scale you're doing, but the other one is that we're highly selective about our participants. It's only the parents who respond. And we've had huge problems in the last few years getting parents, for example, to respond. Or it's people I have access to. I'm here in Nebraska. I work mostly with Nebraska schools. Are those the same as Mississippi schools? Probably not. And so that ability to go to a much larger scale is really interesting. It's really important. And they go hand in hand. I'm not disqualifying any other study. Again, I've published many qualitative studies, many small and kind of minimally viable quantitative studies.
My name's Guy. I publish all the time. This is what you sound like right now. No,
right.
Kidding. You don't.
Let's. So we're talking about generalizability. Maybe the most important thing. It also allows you to stop thinking about p-values. We are constantly. Does the study have enough participants to actually test this? Well, when you have thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of data pieces, power isn't really an issue. Actually, it's the opposite. You're not interested in a p-value because anything, if you have a data set large enough, anything is statistically significant. The question is it important? Is it meaningful? And so you're really pivoting the kind of question on not to what's my alpha or, what is my p-value, but actually to thinking about, is this a meaningful change? And that's a good pivot to have. And let's be honest, it's hard to publish. You want to publish something in highly ranked journals. And one of the ways, not the only way, but one of the ways to do that is to do what, especially in educational research, not enough people do, and that is work with large data sets and have something to say that generalizes.
Right, because it seems like oftentimes we fall into these two camps, right? And you're either a qualitative researcher or a quantitative researcher. And that's always felt incredibly limiting to me in terms of I think the better question to ask is, what are the questions you're interested in pursuing in your research? And what are the kind of methodologies and analytical systems that are going to help you get at that? And it feels like these large-scale data set projects are really great for helping us think through what is the big picture, right? But then I always think about, oftentimes I'll hear about those large-scale data sets and then people will kvetch about oh, but this isn't translating into my own particular context, though this big data set says it does. And I think that's where the qualitative work can come in, the smaller scale work.
Absolutely.
Because these findings in this larger scale, how do you augment them and make them nuanced? It's this ecosystem that I think helps with, one, I think data is kind of the way of we all have to be figuring out how to actually deal with data, how to work with it regardless of kind of your orientation, because it's in a competitive landscape. You mentioned journals, but also grant writing, which you also have a lot of experience in. I hope you know that I do respect your work around writing both journal articles and grants, just so we're clear.
All right.
But that competitive landscape of how can you be the most competitive? How can you, figure that out?
And we also live in a time where we're collecting more data, maybe by design, sometimes just by the fact that you work for an institution and institutions collect data. That's one of the things they do. And most of that data is now digital, which gives you a different kind of access. These points of access really opened up, I think, a lot more opportunities for us in education. But I do remember that even 20 years ago, the international comparison studies, even the longitudinal studies that were handled by what then became IES, there was always a hunger for researchers who actually want to use the data that the government is using a lot of money to collect, but doesn't have the capacity to really analyze from specific points of view. So they do a kind of a horse race. Who's the best country in the world? Who's the worst country in the world? Those kind of things, that's what they produce. That is the least interesting amount of data there.
Gosh, it's like the listicle of research.
Yes.
Wow. Top 10.
Yeah.
Algorithms.
Top 10 countries in literacy education. And you're like,
well. So you highlight the fact that like there are big data sets out there and are available. So as someone who like, this is one of my resolutions over the course of the next 3 years of my professional development plan for myself is to get better and more comfortable with big data. So asking for a friend, that friend is me. So there's all these data sets out there, but what are things that you look for when you're looking at whether or not a data set is good? Like, how do you figure out whether the variables are poorly measured or the data collection was sloppy at such a massive scale? Like, what are the look-fors? Like, if this data set were a sourdough bread, how would you know that it's appropriately proofed so that you get the good crisp crust and the amazing crumb?
Don't know enough about bread, except eating it. But we're looking for a few things always. One is there are some data sets that are out there that have technical manuals, whether it's the Department of Education or the international comparison studies. We've got TIMSS. We've got lately, I've seen PASIC, which is the African really francophone countries right now are collecting data about learners in 6th grade, and I don't remember what the other grade is. They publish manuals online, and you can actually see what are the variables. Do they have the variables I'm interested in? How carefully did they construct their variables? So there's a lot of documentation that goes around it. Mm-hmm. So that's one domain where it's fairly easy because the information is out there. They will tell you reliabilities. They will tell you what weight mechanism they've used. Actually, often it's too much information, especially if you're starting out. And so when I started out with large-scale data, can I find variables that I'm like, this will answer questions that I have? So you're looking for specific variables. But also another way to think about it is who is collecting data that may illuminate the work I'm doing. So I'm working on computer science right now. Code.org has been out there for a long time. They have a lot of data. Mm-hmm. And so the question was, let's start a conversation and seeing what kind of data is it? Because they don't have manuals. They are really producing curriculum, right, that people can access online. But there are some great digital traces in there. So there's some interesting things. How long does it take students to solve the problem? How many times do they try? What happens if they don't succeed? So there's interesting data there that can start illuminating. But you have to ask them, do you actually keep that data? And sometimes the answer is absolutely. And sometimes they're like, we're very sorry, but we've never kept that kind of data. It's a good idea, but maybe in a few years.
Maybe later.
So in a weird way, the first thing you need to do is develop a relationship. So all of this big data, numbers, all of that, it starts with a relationship with the people who hold the key to that data. Because even if they are agencies, you have to convince them that you are using it well, that you will be, that you will honor their intent and represent them well, and they want to know that you can actually carry through.
Oh my gosh, it's like dating for data.
Yes, it is dating for data. That's why, for example, I do work with Code.org. It has taken me 8 years to get to the point where I have access to the data.
It's impressive.
And so sometimes it's a long-term project. The thing to look for early on is probably government agencies or intergovernment agencies like the international studies. And what do you need to do and the way to start is to go to one of the conferences where they have a workshop for people who want to use that. They are dying for people to use their data. because they don't have the capacity and they want a lot of publications out of their hard work they're doing collecting data. So they will hold workshops. They used to do actually week-long free workshops in the summer. I don't know that they're doing that anymore, given where our government is, but they might still be.
Where is our government?
I promise myself we will not discuss this.
Yeah, okay, we're not going.
But all of this is really there. And if you're working at an institution, one of the places to start is start at your institution. Who holds the digital traces data? Is there a way to start de-identifying data and using them? And lately, the AI companies have been sharing interesting data. So that's another avenue. I mean, you have to be creative and you have to say, what is in my realm of research that I'm interested in? Who is sitting on that data? And then start exploring what data is out there. How can we do something with it?
Nice. Okay, so we've talked some data sources.
Yeah.
Now, here's what I'm worried about, because as part of my own personal ongoing professional development, I'm starting a master's in statistics.
Yes. Congratulations.
I don't start until next fall, so we'll see how this goes.
Okay.
I have to take calculus. I'm taking it right now.
Ooh, okay. Enjoy.
It's not going well and it's week 1. But it's fine, right? Like, so thinking about someone coming into this and an entry point, there's lots of talk around like, oh, you have to know Python, you have to know SQL, you have to do some computing in the cloud. Like, here's what I'm good at. I am good at Excel. Okay?
Yes, and that's an important skill.
So talk me through how someone who is, let's say that they're like, this is not something I have done.
Yeah.
What would be a starting point for them? Like, what is the, I don't want to say lowest point of access, but like the least, the path of least resistance to get into playing with large data sets in terms of analysis? Like, talk me through, where would you start if you were like, I'm Nick, I know nothing?
And to be honest, I can talk about how I started. Because I come from the world of limited experiments. I mean, they are quantitative often, but they are limited. So you're working with, even if you're working with 100 or 200 or 800, it's still small numbers when you consider large data sets. And so there are two paths that I've taken, and I've actually taken them concurrently. And I still use these methodologies, even though I'm getting better at it. And the first thing is, get a friend. So,
hi, friend, help me with data.
Yes. So get somebody who's more comfortable, who you can talk about the issues, they can do some analysis and process some of the data, so you're not alone, because it is scary. And, Excel cannot take, so the last data set I got from code.org, Excel cannot contain the numbers. Excel doesn't have enough rows down. Sometimes you don't have enough columns. It's like you need something else. But this is where you can get somebody who gives you a sure footing, even if it's just a person you're checking in with and say, I'm trying to do this. Am I doing this right? Is incredibly important, because this is not where you want to spend your time on wondering until it gets published if you did it right or not. It's not a good way to spend your time. The second thing to do is to take a small chunk of data. So take just the first 100 cases, or if it's a lot of variables, just 50 variables, and explore the data in a size, in a bite size that allows you to really get a sense of what's going on and develop a strategy. And then you can say to somebody else or to yourself, okay, now I can do it with all of the data. Because a chunk of the data will tell you what missing data you have, really important to think about, and make a decision about what you're going to do, what variables you thought are there, and they're there, but there's not enough variance to play with. There's lots of questions around this. And do I actually understand what those variables do? So again, taking a small chunk. So for example, a few years ago, I was really interested in working on what are kids doing with digital books? They're getting digital books, and some of the companies kept data about how many times they're being accessed, how many pages they're looking at, how long are they doing it for, and all of that. So it was a lovely data set. But a data set like that, they identified from the institution for every student that ever opened a digital book, and within one instance every time they opened it, is a lot of data. So the first thing we did is okay, let's focus on one semester, and within that semester, let's focus on one college, and within that college, let's find a class that has been taught multiple times, some kind of an introductory class. They have a lot of students, and that was the chunk we worked with. It was still a few thousand students, but it's not a million rows where you lose yourself in that process. And it allowed us to do some interesting things. So that, for me, are the two entry strategies. The third one that hasn't happened at the time is that AI is incredibly powerful.
Okay.
In helping you program and helping. In my work, I work with Julius AI. There are other things out there. And when you ask for certain procedures, it'll also make suggestions. And the advantage of that is people are worried about AI because AI can make up shit.
Oh yeah.
We all know that. But the way they've worked it is the Gen AI part writes a program. The program runs in Python, which is true of most of the AI things. So what you're getting is not the response from the LLM. The LLM builds a Python program that then runs your data.
Oh, interesting.
So you can trust the results. Now, the question is the programming good enough? Right?
Right.
That is the question you want to have in your mind. But you're not wondering if it just invented a number, because this came from a different part of the machine. So you can trust that. You still have to track it. You still have to know what you're doing. And that's where a friend comes in.
That's where you would come in. So mentorship would be
incredibly important. Yes.
Right? Because even I am both excited, but also terrified. Because
it is kind of terrifying.
It is kind of terrifying, but I'm also willing to jump in, and I keep reminding myself that as adults, we often don't allow ourselves to feel stupid.
Yes.
And I'm prepared to feel stupid. It feels like a pretty basic feeling these days.
And I'm working right now on our code.org data. I'm working with a graduate student, with a professor in computer science, and with a graduate student in computer science that knows how to do these things in Python. And sometimes I do the analysis. She's doing the analysis. Thank you, Sheila. You're amazing. And
want to be friends, Sheila?
But
I'm good too.
But here's the thing that I've learned along the way is you have to really think through what you're doing. And you have to make sure that the questions are there. And yes, you have to make sure you're feeling that you're ready to feel stupid. Because I suggested something. We meet once a week. I suggested this strategy. And then a day later, I'm like, that was a dumb proposal. And maybe I should have thought about that a little bit.
Well, so let's switch that around though. It was you being active and trying to contribute.
Yes. But
no deficit thinking.
Well, it's not deficit thinking. It's sometimes you need to think through. But what I'm saying is that feeling like you made a mistake happens often in these data sets. And again, the trick is always to go back and say, and this reminds me of my early training as a graduate student. You get all of these output and then you ask, well, does any of this mean anything? I mean, yes, I can do math in 5 different ways with all of these variables. Something will come out. Is it saying something significant? And that's where I've recently really engaged with Open Science Framework and really making sure we're theory-driven and making sure we're putting our intents first and not just go fishing in the data. Okay. Because if you go fishing with the data, you're going to find something. I don't know if it's interesting or meaningful, but you're going to find something.
So essentially you're saying, bottom line, large data sets, not just for computer science or data scientists anymore. You want to open it up. For really anyone asking empirical questions that require scale to answer properly, when you have the answers from the small studies
And now you want to see, does this actually generalize to large data sets where, because you can get de-identified data, it's not as selective as the 20 people you can, the 20 teachers you can recruit from Lincoln Public Schools. That helps us answer interesting question and really thinking through that methodology.
And I think one of the things that hearing you talk throughout this whole episode is tools are increasingly accessible, right? The age of AI has opened up a variety of different avenues. Data sets are increasingly available, and methodological guidance is increasingly clear. But if you're looking to get started, be prepared for a learning curve.
Be prepared for a learning curve, and remember that you should not be intimidated by scale, because the scale does not replace a theoretical understanding. So if you're working on a data sets in reading, you have to know reading. You can't just do math on it, because then you're getting, the ridiculous econometrics studies that came out in the last few years will say, well, teachers that use this method, their kids were 2 weeks ahead in school. And I'm going, okay, 2 weeks ahead, this is all we got? This is not much. But they're like, but it's very large data. And I'm going, well, the effect size, where the money is, where understanding what does it mean is really critically important. Also, 2 weeks in high school is not the same as 2 weeks in first grade and all of these other questions. So again, the domain expertise is incredibly important and the theory is incredibly important. Otherwise, you're just swimming in data, making silly decisions.
Right.
And that's where friends, if they come from a different domain, you have to make sure that you're guiding the questions and how to answer them. And they're just doing the calculation and making sure that it's sound from the statistical perspective, from the analytical perspective. But we've got to make sure we're focused on theory.
So it seems like those questions are really like your buoyant devices in that sea of data, right? Like that's what keeps you afloat and helps you separate out, not to steal a book title, but signal from noise, right? Like you need to know your field, you need to know your context, and you have to design studies that are actually going to answer questions, answer things.
And I love that analogy because with very large data sets, you can drown in them easily and pop somewhere, ask a question, get an answer, and then dive back under, pop somewhere else and ask another question. And that's not really a good way to go about it. It also will likely not end up being successful because each one of those questions takes time, takes energy out of you, and doesn't cohere? Cohere, thank you. I knew I was getting it wrong, but doesn't cohere to something meaningful that you can actually talk about. And so that focus on expertise and increasing your expertise through exploring those data sets is critical.
So that your gravestone doesn't say death by data set.
Yes, absolutely.
Although that does sound kind of fun.
I mean, I'm dead. Do I care?
No. No, right? It can be
and people will visit for many years to come and chuckle. Yes.
So it's nice because these large data sets can bring kind of this empirical power that smaller scale or small scale studies don't have. And it allows you to answer those questions. And the researchers who really figure this out right now are the ones who are going to be shaping this field in 10 years or 5 years, I would say, even 2 years. Data, big data is the language of right now.
It's definitely a language of right now. And the advantage for getting to know a large data set is then it can feed you for a while. It's not necessarily a one-time thing. If it's a good, rich data set, you can have a series of publications that come from that can really help shape a field where the initial studies were done. And reading, I think, is a great area to go because there's a tremendous amount of small-scale studies done. We know a lot about reading, but the large-scale questions are still out there. And that's where it can come in and help feed in a way that we couldn't, I would argue, in the past. We've had a few small, so there were longitudinal studies, but they followed small number of people. And now we suddenly have access to these wealth of data that still requires a lot of love and care.
As all research does. So think about large data sets as potentially a space for growth in your own professional development as a researcher, because the resources are out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we need people just to, stay curious, do things, expand, stretch.
So,
Yes.
may you have wind in your sails and large enough data sample sizes to say something significant.
This is our wish for you. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.